Traveling east from the visitor center, the orange line only takes you to Yaqui Point. That's it. The rest you have to do by car, bike, or hike. This stretch is called Desert View, and that's why I entered on the east rim, as I wanted to visit the areas less traveled by visitors. Alright, now that you're all thoroughly confused, I'm sure, I did take the blue line from the visitor center to get to the red line, because that's where everybody was headed. And once I got to the end of the blue line to take the red line, the line was about 2 hours. So I decided to just walk along the rim trail and say I'll do the red line area the next visit. With all the signage getting on the buses saying mandatory must wear a mask, nobody was wearing a mask, not even the bus drivers. The rim trail is about 13 miles long and most of it's paved. Look, you can see the Colorado River down there. I did some of it. It was enough, and it satisfied my itch of seeing the Grand Canyon without the masses of people. I did stumble upon the Grand Canyon Pioneer Cemetery and found that quite interesting. Nearly 2 billion years of Earth's geological history have been exposed as the Colorado River and its tributaries cut their channels through the layer after layer of rock, while the Colorado Plateau was uplifted. The Colorado River established its course through the area about 5 to 6 million years ago. Since that time, the Colorado River has driven the downcutting of the tributaries and the retreat of the cliffs, simultaneously deepening and widening the canyon. The Grand Canyon is 277 miles long and up to 18 miles wide, and attains a depth of over a mile, 6,093 feet. For thousands of years, the area has been continuously inhabited by Native Americans who built settlements within the canyon and its many caves. The Pueblo people considered the Grand Canyon a holy site and made pilgrimages to it. The first European known to have viewed the Grand Canyon was Garcia Lopez de Cardenas from Spain, who arrived in 1540. The Grand Canyon is bigger than the state of Rhode Island. It has over 1,000 hidden caves around the canyon. 335 have been recorded. Even fewer have been mapped or inventoried. Today, only one cave is open to the public, the Cave of the Domes on Horseshoe Mesa. The most dangerous animal in the park is the rock squirrel. From bighorn sheep, the California condors, and the Gila monsters, the Grand Canyon is home to a large array of wildlife, but it's the rock squirrel that causes the most trouble. Every year, dozens of visitors are bitten when they try to feed these animals. The black suspension bridge, known as the Kaibab Trail Suspension Bridge, spans the Colorado River. The span length is over 440 feet. The Black Bridge was built in 1928. It would remain the only crossing of the river for hundreds of river miles, until the Silver Bridge was built just downstream within the park during the 1960s. The air in the Grand Canyon is the cleanest air in the United States. There are 6 species of rattlesnakes, but the Grand Canyon pink rattlesnake is only found here. The Grand Canyon is full of fossils, though none of them are from dinosaurs. Since the canyon layers were formed long before dinosaurs walked the earth, it is, however, home to fossils of ancient marine animals that date back 1.2 billion years. In the 1950s, commercial airplanes often took detours over the park to give passengers a look at the marvel. In 1956, however, 2 of these planes tragically collided. The crash had no survivors, leading to the federal government to create the FAA. Grand Canyon National Park was established as the 17th U.S. national park by an act of Congress signed into law by President Woodrow Wilson on February 26, 1919. Traveling east on the Desert View Road, or the east side of the park, is where I saw most of the wildlife. And on this end of the park, the day before, I caught a glimpse of this little sign that said Arizona Trail. Well, I had to go back and check that out. And that was a really cool adventure, off-roading into the pine trees and seeing even more animals. The Arizona National Scenic Trail spans from Mexico border to Utah. The trail begins at Coronado National Memorial near the U.S.-Mexico border to the Utah border. The 800-mile-long Arizona Trail was completed on December 16, 2011. The trail is designed as a primitive trail for hiking, equestrians, mountain biking, and even cross-country skiing. By now it was time to leave the big ditch and head south, as I was hoping to find some camping in or around the Sedona area while we're still in the higher elevations of the cooler temperatures. So from the East Rim, I headed back to the Grand Canyon Village and then traveled the 59 miles on Highway 64 back to Williams, Arizona, headed over to Flagstaff, and then took the 89A south. Here, I was going to stop in Sedona. That didn't happen, and I moved on to Montezuma's Well and Montezuma's Castle. Traveling towards Sedona, I was checking out the different campgrounds and found them to be just about completely full with people, and it almost was like being in a Target parking lot. Once I arrived in Sedona, the actual city, it was nothing that I remembered from the 90s. I think it was 91 the last time I was there. A couple cute motels and a little street with shops. Nope, now it's all the big box hotels and wine country and everything lit up like Disneyland. Needless to say, I kept on driving and didn't even stop. It's just not my bag. And as expected, leaving the Sedona, traveling downhill to the desert floor, temperatures were up in the 100-degree weather. But I made it to Montezuma Well and was just absolutely blown away. For out in the middle of nowhere in the desert was this huge, it's almost like a crater, or they call it a well, but it was amazing. Montezuma Well is a natural limestone sinkhole through which some 1,500,000 U.S. gallons of water emerges each day from an underground spring. It's located about 11 miles northeast of Montezuma's Castle. The ruins of several prehistoric dwellings are scattered in and around the rim of the well. Their inhabitants belong to several indigenous American cultures that are believed to have occupied the Verde Valley between 700 and 1425. The well measures 386 feet in diameter from rim to rim and contains near a constant volume of spring water even in times of severe drought. The water is highly carbonated and contains high levels of arsenic. I know what you're thinking. I did the same thing, and I actually went to the park ranger and said, "Is this contaminated water why we have the term Montezuma's Revenge?" And he said it's completely unrelated. As with Montezuma Castle, the label Montezuma is a misnomer. The Aztec Emperor Montezuma had no connection to the site or the early indigenous people that occupied the area. The high concentration of dissolved carbon dioxide gas in the water of the well, which accounts to more than 80 times the typical freshwater concentration, has prevented the development of any kind of fish population. So now I'm heading to the well outlet, down this hike into what is like a mini forest. It was so beautiful. The water from the well flows into Beaver Creek, and it travels, I think, 10 or 11 miles and goes right past Montezuma's Castle, which we're going to be heading to next. The Pit House Ruins is located near the entrance to the Montezuma's Well National Monument. A short paved trail leads you to the shelter that covered the excavated remains of a basket maker era pit house. Within the enclosed area, there are holes in the ground that would have held the upright posts that made the walls. The two large holes in the center were for the main roof supports. After the site was excavated, soil cement was applied to the ground to preserve its shape and appearance. The pit house dates back to 1050. Here is an artist's rendering of what it most likely looked like. Just a hop, skip, and a jump down the road, I arrived at Montezuma's Castle National Monument. Montezuma Castle National Monument protects a set of well-preserved dwellings located in Camp Verde, Arizona, which were built between approximately 1100 and 1425. The main structure comprises of 5 stories and about 20 rooms and was built over the course of 3 centuries. It is not a castle in the traditional sense, but instead a functioning more like a prehistoric high-rise apartment complex. Montezuma Castle is situated about 90 feet up a sheer limestone cliff facing the adjacent river Beaver Creek. It is the best preserved cliff dwellings in North America, in part because of its ideal placement in a natural alcove. Its location and its immense scale of the floor space across 5 stories suggests the Agua were daring builders and skilled engineers. Access to the structure was most likely permitted by a series of portable ladders, which made it difficult for enemy tribes to penetrate the natural defense of the vertical barrier.
And receiving an invitation into this cliff-dwelling home, what you would have seen might well have been something like this cutaway model of Montezuma Castle. On the top floor, the elderly village lookout keeps his solitary vigil. His eyes search for approaching danger to those working the fields below the castle. It seems that over the ages, children and their actions change very little. On the 4th floor, you'll find a concerned mother scurrying to reach her adventuresome son, precariously balanced on the edge of the roof. On the 3rd floor, an aging man leads his blind wife across the balcony. You'll also meet women busily preparing food, getting supplies from storerooms, making pottery and grinding corn. Usually women ground the corn, their staple food, only in small as-needed quantities and prepared it in various ways. Weavers used the 2nd floor loom to weave cotton breechcloths, bags, and blankets, Villagers used the wooden ladders as stairways to carry up provisions from fields and water from Beaver Creek.
There's a series of horizontal holes in the sides of the cliff under the castle. This was a 5-story structure at one time, wooden, and those holes were actually the sockets which held the wooden structure against the cliff side. Archaeologists determined it had caught fire and burned away. They also determined it was a much larger structure than the castle itself. And here's a view of Beaver Creek, just below the castle. Montezuma Castle was declared a national monument in December 1906 by President Theodore Roosevelt. Moving on from Montezuma's Well, Montezuma's Castle, I'm now heading northwest to Tuzigoot and then off to Jerome. Tuzigoot National Monument has preserved a 2 to 3 story Pueblo ruin on the summit of limestone and sandstone ridge just east of Clarkdale, Arizona. It rests 120 feet above the Verde River floodplain, and there you can see it on top of that hill. When Tuzigoot was discovered, it was really just a pile of rocks. They had to dig it all out, find the foundations, and rebuild it to what we see today. In fact, the National Park Service tested different types of cement or grout on this structure, and once they determined the right formula, they used it on all the other similar type structures throughout the national park system. Tuzigoot National Monument was a fun place to visit. You actually get to walk around in and on top of the entire structure and take in the marvel of what these people had created. Unlike a lot of other national parks or landmarks or monuments where you can have to stand back and just kind of observe. So yeah, this was a fun one. The Tuzigoot site is an elongated complex of stone masonry rooms that were built along the spine of a natural outcrop in the Verde Valley. The central rooms stand higher than the others, and they appear to have served public functions. The Pueblo has 110 rooms. Tuzigoot is a Toronto Apache term for crooked waters. The Pueblo was built by the Agua people between 1125 and 1400. The ruins at Tuzigoot incorporate very few doors. Instead, the inhabitants used ladders accessed by trapdoor type openings in the roofs to enter each room. The Pueblo people lived principally by farming and supplemented their staple crops by hunting and gathering. Their surrounding offered an abundance of resources, water from the river and streams, fertile land alongside the waterways, and significant game including deer, antelope, rabbit, deer, muskrat, and duck. To augment a diet that relied heavily on corn, they also mined a salt deposit a few miles away, and evidence suggests the salt was traded widely throughout the region. The monument was excavated from 1933 to 1935 by Louis Claywood and Edward Spicer from the University of Arizona, with funding from the Federal Civil Works and Works Projects Administrations. In 1935 to 1936, with additional federal funding, the ruins were prepared for public display, and a Pueblo Revival-style museum and visitor center was constructed. Franklin D. Roosevelt designated Tuzigoot Ruins a U.S. National Monument in July of 1939. Jerome is located in the Black Hills of Arizona, founded in the late 19th century on Cleopatra Hill, overlooking the Verde Valley. Jerome is located more than 5,000 feet above sea level. Supported in its heyday by rich copper mines, it was home to more than 10,000 people in the 1920s. As of the 2010 census, its population has dwindled to 444. In Jerome State Park sits the Douglas Mansion. It has been a landmark in Jerome since 1916, when Jimmy Douglas built it on top of the hill just above his Little Daisy mine. Douglas designed the house as a hotel for mining officials and investors, as well as for his own private use. It featured a wine cellar, billiard room, marble shower, steam heat, and much ahead of its time, a central vacuum system. Douglas was most proud of the fact that the house was constructed of adobe bricks that were made on the site, and the house is the largest adobe structure in Arizona. Just outside of Jerome, in Clarkdale, Arizona, is the Arizona Copper Art Museum. Now, this is housed in a 1928 Clarkdale High School building that was abandoned since the 60s. I do believe after touring this museum, they have at least one of everything ever made out of copper. The museum originated from a simple spark. In 1958, John and Patricia Minneke of Minnesota saw an antique shop that had several copper molds, and that captivated them. Later, Pat opened a small antique shop, which kickstarted the massive collection that is today displayed in the museum. It is amazing. Each room was its own category, and labeled as such. Kitchenware, drinking vessels. It was crazy. There is so much copper in this building. I've never seen so much in my life. And it also tells the history of the metals as well, which was fascinating. If you're ever in Clarkdale, Arizona, for the $8 entrance fee, I'd visit. Leaving the Jerome and Clarkdale area, I headed to Agua, Fria, south on the 17. I wanted to see this national monument as it was strictly an off-road 4x4 vehicle only way to get there. Fortunately, it's hard to hold the camera and be off-roading at the same time, especially when you're going over little creeks and the such. I was only about 30 minutes in, and this came on the radio.
Flash flood warning. The National Weather Service in Flagstaff has issued a flash flood warning for Coconino County in north central Arizona, Yavapai County in west central Arizona, until 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. At 3:53 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, Doppler radar indicated thunderstorms producing heavy rain across the warned area.
At that point, I took a gander around and I could see those heavy dark rain clouds coming at me. So I turned around and hightailed it out. Making it back to the national park entrance, I'd say it was just in the nick of time. So that's my route. That was my 6 days traveling through northern Arizona. I had a blast. Love you, Mom.